In this video, I'm going to show you all the steps that I took to finish the surface of the concrete slab for my shed. In my last video, I had finished with the bull float, but we needed to wait several hours for all of the water on the top of the slab to be absorbed. The amount of time you'll need to wait will vary from region to region and with the temperature and the humidity and the weather of the day. In my case, it was several hours. Now, I'm certainly not going to claim to be an expert on how to finish concrete. In fact, this is my first fairly large slab that I've ever done. My goal was to make it as smooth as possible and then to finish it with a broom to give it a little bit of grip on the surface so I wouldn't slip if I ever spilled anything on the floor in the shed. Before I get too far into the finishing process, I want to show you one thing that we did that saved my back. And that is, we had a little bit of extra concrete left over after the pour. And this is common. Most of the time you will have at least a little bit left over. We broke it up and split it into smaller sections and then left it on a piece of plywood so that it would cure. Later, these were very easy to just bang off with a hammer and dispose of. Okay, so once the water had all been reabsorbed and the cure was well underway, I started with finishing my edges. I'm only going to be doing this in the doorways of the shed, and it requires a specialized tool. This is an edging trowel. It's very flat on the bottom and then is curved on only one side. To use it, you just run it very gently up and down right along the edge of your form wherever you want to have a nice rounded over corner. It takes several passes to get the concrete to smooth out really well, but the end result is a very nice rounded corner. Up next, I needed to put the relief groove across the center of my slab. This also uses a special tool that looks like this. You can pick this up at your local home center. Following the line I'd snapped earlier, I just very carefully cut in the groove, again using several passes. Once these two steps were done, I was ready to start finishing the surface. The first tool that I'm going to use is a float. This is made of magnesium, and the underside of it is slightly convex. It has just a little bit of a bow to it. And that's used to help push the aggregate farther down into the concrete and to bring up the cream so that you can have a nice workable kind of a mud that you can use to make the floor nice and smooth. The other tool that you need is a steel trowel like this. It has a perfectly flat underside that will leave a very, very flat, smooth finish. Once the concrete had cured well enough, I kneeled down on a pad so that I could reach all the way to the center. Starting with the magnesium float, I would get the concrete as smooth as possible, and then I would switch to the steel trowel to do the finishing work for that area. This process goes relatively quickly, and I found that it was easiest for me to start from the center of the slab and work my way towards the edges. This was my first time using these tools, and it wasn't very hard to figure out how they worked. You want to make sure that you lift the front edge of the tool as you slide it across the concrete so that it doesn't dig in. When I had finished surfacing the entire slab, I thought it was probably time to start sweeping it. But this was way too early, and I made a pretty big mistake here. You can see as I'm dragging this broom across, it is digging way too deeply into the surface of the concrete and leaving too deep of an impression. Luckily, it's easy to fix. Again, you just grab your float, redo the surface, and then grab your steel trowel and go over it again. When I did this, I realized the resulting surface there was substantially smoother and nicer than the rest of the slab, so I got to finish it all again, going back over every surface. The result was a really smooth slab, so I'm kind of happy that I made that mistake. After this second pass, I was more patient, and I let the slab cure for at least another hour or so before I decided to get after it with the broom again. As you can see, the surface is really smooth and nice. And while it was curing, of course, I had to make a few of my own personal touches. Not wanting to have to finish the entire slab again, rather than just going for it with the broom, I decided to do some small test areas underneath where the wall plates are going to wind up being, so it would be hidden. I tested every 15 or 20 minutes. This was my first test, and I felt like it was still a little too deep. Here was the next one, and it was a little better, but still maybe a little too deep. And here's the final one, and I felt like that was just about what I was looking for. Again, this is all to taste. How you do yours is up to you. I decided it was time to sweep the whole slab. I found that I'd waited long enough that I needed to do 2 passes with the broom, but the result was a very nice non-slip floor. You can see here the difference between the smooth finish of the trowel for the corner and what the broom did to give us a little bit of traction on the surface. So that was about it for finishing the surface. It's really pretty simple. It does take a little bit of time, but it's pretty easy to do. I then let this cure for about another 4 hours until the early evening of the same day, when I decided it was ready to seal. Now the reason I'm sealing is because concrete requires water to cure, and there's 2 different ways you can do this. You can either keep your concrete wet with a sprinkler or going out and watering it very frequently by hand, or you can apply a sealer to it, and I chose to do that because I wasn't going to be available to be able to keep it wet all the time. I went with this product. It's made of acrylic, and you can get it at your local home center. If you do use this, a couple of notes. You do need to shake it a lot before you start, and it would be a good idea to run it through a screen filter, like for paint, before you actually apply it to your slab. There was a little bit of debris that had been left over from when I broomed. There were some bits of sand and things that had kind of kicked up, so I decided to sweep it with a smaller broom. This wasn't changing the texture at all, it was just cleaning up some of the leftovers from when I swept it with the concrete broom. Then I loaded the sealer into a small weed sprayer and used that to apply it to the slab. The directions say to apply it in both directions, and so I did. I went this direction first, and then I switched 90 degrees and sprayed the other direction as well. So you'll notice this goes on with kind of a milky appearance, and as it begins to cure, you'll see kind of some patterns or stripes or designs appearing. Don't worry, that's all normal. It's as a result of imperfections in the surface of the concrete or the thickness of the product that I was spraying it on. And all of that will disappear as it cures. It will dry completely clear. So that's all there is to do today on the slab. My next step is going to be to remove the forms, but I have to wait at least 24, maybe 48 hours before I do that because I'm in fairly cool weather. So I'm going to cover that in my next video, as well as the rest of the final finishing steps that I did on this slab. So hey, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.